to work and having access to a lot of other printers and learning all about 3D printing. And along with that, we also offer a class and a certificate program open to anybody, not just veterans. And that's been very popular. A lot of people think that 3D printing is something that they want to learn more about. So hopefully it'll grow and continue to be something that we can support here at Pellissippi. We are anticipating a grant from the NSF, National Science Foundation, to do some curriculum development and teacher training so that we can teach high school, middle school, and community college instructors how to teach 3D printing. So hopefully we're going to have that funded very soon, and part of that is going to be teaching these teachers how to assemble printers, sending them home with a printer and having them make new printers with that. So trying to take advantage of that whole idea of riprap and open source and using that as an educational tool, because that's where we really see it being strong, encouraging young people to think more about what can we do with this, how can we use this, how can we build on this for the future of the country, for the future job markets. So it's going to be pretty interesting to see where, I think, to see where this all heads in 10 years. I think I compare it to PCs. When I was a kid, the first PCs were really expensive, very big. The only people that got them were people that knew how to program them, because you couldn't do anything with them if you didn't know how to program, and you rebuilt them and improved everything yourself. And now we have cell phones that are more powerful than those computers were, that do more, that have more apps with them. And I think 3D printing is going to head along that same trajectory where it gets introduced more and more. It gets better and better and faster and produces more high quality materials, and that we're all going to be, maybe not all owning one, but I think we'll all be using pieces that were 3D printed in the next 10 years probably.
So does anybody have any ideas, when you first heard about 3D printing, did anybody have any ideas of a thing that they wanted to print right off the bat? Come on, so it's a magic box, anything comes out of it. What's the first thing that you want to see come out of the magic box that anything comes out of?
I wanted a phone mount for my car, so when I clicked my phone in when I got in and connected to the car, just print one of those, print a holder for it.
Yeah, see, that's a perfect example, because you can do it so that it's perfect for your car, that it's the color you want, that it's got anything on it you like. I love that. That's a good, excellent example.
In Google now? Okay.
How about anybody else? So magic box,
Probably
come
won't
on.
be getting any audio because nobody's using any microphone.
All it takes is a little bit of time. Come on.
Okay, we're not going to stream because we can't get any audio because they're not using microphones.
There you go. It does that too.
Okay, so I don't know. Just to let you know.
If we have them move to the table and use
If they pass the handheld, then that would be mic'd.
to this.
They'd be mic'd in the house
Oh yeah.
and into our screen, but not into yours. They would have to be talking to this one to get into your recording.
Okay.
And if this were on the table, probably pick up by up.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, last year I did a lot of work
I've
with
got-
a lady
see if I've
who
got an
was
extension
actually
for
just
the
got an
USB.
extension. She was a third grade
Might get
teacher,
over there.
and she was going just incredibly insane. She was making basically something on the printer every week for her class to illustrate some point, because it's so tactile. And for a third grade class, that's perfect. And,
Can you see if you're picking anything up on the audio?
we're going to do something with money. Let's make our own money. Coins and all kinds of different denominations and sizes.
If somebody,
What happens
if
if you
question,
make
people
odd
ask a
number
question, put
coins?
the audio into the house,
It
then
was
this
very
one will pick it
interesting.
up. Because the harp system would, come out the speakers and then I think that might pick it up.
I think that I might talk a little bit about the technology behind 3D printing. Of course, as Lynn touched on, conventional machining practices have been to take this chunk of steel, this chunk of aluminum, this chunk of plastic, any number of things, and actually take away part of the material that's there. One of the failures of that system is that you've got all of this waste material. You've taken an entire block of this material. Let's say, for example, Alcoa, they will cast an entire block of aluminum to get to this one little block inside of it because it's this prime piece of aluminum that's inside of it. There's so much waste material that's involved in that it has to be then recycled. What additive manufacturing does for us is if we want just this tiny little piece, if we've got 10 kilograms of plastic available, all we have to have involved with it is this one little piece and the support material for it. There's very little waste involved in it. Also, with conventional manufacturing, there are jigs, which is basically a piece that you've made in order to hold another piece so you can quickly interchange them. You've got all these different vices and tooling for holding down all these pieces. With additive manufacturing, you have a flat build plane, and it just adds on the material to the top of that. So it takes hours of setup and converts them into maybe minutes of programming. There are now technologies that allow us to auto-calibrate these machines, even on a hobby scale, where it used to take us hours and hours to actually level the bed and get the build plane to the point where it was perfectly level with our print head. Now we can actually set up an auto-calibration feature, which does this automatically. We push a button and it goes, probes a few points on the table, and you're done. This thing is probably one of the most intriguing parts of it to me has been how quickly it has advanced certain technologies that have been the same for a certain amount of time. CAD, for example, computer-aided drafting. Up until this point, it's been mostly a numbers-based system where you go in and it's not something that is very user-friendly, not something that's very intuitive. Probably the first program that I can think of that I ran across that was more intuitive was Google SketchUp. And with Google SketchUp, there came the ability to have this cylinder or this item that you start with, and then rather than having to, tell the computer, at certain number of coordinates, make a hole of, these dimensions, rather than doing that, you could actually say, I've got this piece cylinder, I've got this hole cylinder, put them together, and then you would actually have something, a cylinder that has a hole through it. Instead of having to type in all these things, you have a user-friendly interface that allows you to do that very easily. With more people picking up 3D printing, more people having it available to them, there's been things that have come along like Tinkercad, which Tinkercad is extremely easy. Beyond the fact that it's user-friendly, it's also available completely online. Now it's a cloud-based system where you can create an item, and rather than having to upload it for others to have it available to them, this thing is already online, available for anyone to access. So if you wanted to make your phone case, then anybody else that has the same phone could access his profile if he made it live, and they could then download that case and print it. It's easy as that. It's just amazing how quickly the technology has advanced with the availability of this to general people, to people who are in IT, to people who code and things of that sort. It's covered all fields. As far as the technology itself, though, we started off, it seems like, years ago with an extrusion-based printer, which would, extrude a little stream of plastic goo onto a table. And those nozzles they used were huge. So you'd have what literally looked like filament to make, the Eiffel Tower, and it looked really low resolution. But now the nozzles that we're using are micron thin. You can print down at such a low layer height now that the parts seem to be smooth. And one of the advantages now is that we're moving into other materials as well. Instead of just having to have filament that's extruded onto a plate, you've got these videos now of them pulling items out of what is a fluid. And it's a UV curing fluid so that the build time is actually a lot shorter now, because they can basically print one layer all at once rather than having to take a layer and extrude out all the parts on that layer. They can actually expose that all at once with a UV light within a certain image, then index up. And basically, each layer might take a grand total of 5 seconds if those UV curing resins are tuned properly to the light source. So we've moved from extrusion-based 3D printing to UV curing based printing. I mean, there's no telling what's going to come next. They may come up with some type of wood-based 3D printer, something that grows in its place on a layer rather than even having to have this vat of fluid. So it's very much open to other people trying different things. It's open source. That's the beauty of it, is that nobody is hiding their code. Nobody is saying, oh, well, you can't have that because it's a trade secret. Everyone's just throwing this out there because it's for the love of it. They enjoy doing what they do. And anyone here that has an idea, the world's just an open build plate.
If there is something that you want to print, chances are that somebody's already designed something like it anyway. So you can go on websites like
Thingiverse?
Thingiverse, MakerBot's website, and they have just thousands of different 3D models that are ready to print you can download. One of the things that we've done kind of in preparation for Maker Week this week is we've been playing with some prosthetic hands. So there's a website called Enable, and they're a nonprofit, and they're trying to connect people with 3D printers with people that need prosthetic hands and prosthetic arms. And so they've got a couple of different models that you can print out on your printers and then try to find somebody that needs it, and you donate the hand to them. So we're in the stage right now of assembling some of our first hands that we printed on various printers. One of them is very colorful because we printed it on about every printer we have, little pieces of it. So we bought the kit to finish assembling it, and then we'll have to take one of our hands and mail it to Enable, kind of donate it to them. They take a look at it and see if it's what they need it to be to give to somebody, and then they'll try to place us with somebody that needs that size just for them. So we're just we don't even have to know anything about prosthetics and how they work. We can just take all those files and print them and assemble it and have it ready for somebody. So that's one of the really neat uses of 3D printing, because it used to be that prosthetic hands would cost about $50,000, and for a kid that's constantly growing, it was really too expensive to keep upgrading and sizing it correctly for them. And now you can print one for probably about $20 worth of material on some of these tabletop printers that we have. So that's going to be a pretty neat program that I hope we can keep involved with. And if you've got ideas, you can always go in there and change some of the different files. And they have people that do that all the time, and they'll send it back and go, oh, I made a change to it. And if Enable likes it, then they can actually upgrade their kit so that you can print out that new version of it. So everything's evolving, just like the printers are evolving. All of those files are evolving too. So if you build something like that holder, you can put it online. Chances are somebody's going to make changes to it and post that online, and you might be able to print out a better one next year. Yeah. We have one printer that we've just gotten finished where one of my students is making just something that holds the filament in the right place, because the filament's on a holder and it keeps kind of moving around and it interferes with the way the printer moves up and down. So I told him to put that online too, because I'm sure everybody else that has a printer has that same problem, and somebody's going to be looking for that and wishing they had a solution for it. So you go in there and you print that off and attach it to your printer, and you fix the problem. So the open source idea is really fascinating and amazing. This whole idea of sharing all that information without somebody having to pay for it. So I hope we can talk to Adrian, because
So I guess we can get started. If we can get our panel, we're gonna have to kind of crowd around this podium. Apologize. We've got our mic here. It looks like we're gonna have to ask Dr. Boyer to respond to our questions at a later time. We're having some technical difficulties, and I apologize for that. But to kind of set the pace of what we're talking about, we're looking at creative learning in the context of this disruptive technology like 3D printing and other fabrication and manufacturing, where you can control the outcome yourself, and also collaborative learning, and just the role in education and in society that this has. We've got some questions for Dr. Boyer. We hope that he can answer these at a later time, and we can pass those in at a later time. But also, if you all have any insight, feel free to speak up to these. Again, this is Sam McClanahan. He's the treasurer at Knox Makers. I'm James Burrows. I'm the communications director at Knox Makers. We've got Seth Giles, Lynn Klett, and we've got David Rhea. So let me just start with a couple questions that I have. Well, I would like to ask Professor Boyer, how have peers influenced his creative path? I'd also like to ask, how does disruptive technology like 3D printing influence society? And if we have any insight here, if you all have anything you'd like to speak of this. I apologize, I was expecting to connect this morning. I've also, another question I've got is, how does digital fabrication relate to education? I feel like there's a lot that we can explore there. And we've got some other questions. Would you like to?
So what are we? I'm not following exactly what we're going to do. Are we going to try and answer for Adrian, or?
Well, we can. I'm hoping this is kind of a casual feel. If you all would like to try to answer, if you have questions for our panel, I wanted to kind of knock these questions out first. It doesn't look like we're going to be able to connect with Professor Boyer, but I want to go ahead and get these questions out there. If he can answer them for us at a later time, we can do that.
So for our panel, do you want us to kind of go around and kind of answer each question, as ourselves?
Sure.
That's kind of what you're looking for? Okay.
Sure, we can do that. We've got a list of questions if you just want to pick what you want to answer or what you want to talk about. I apologize to everybody. This is going to be a learning experience. Hopefully next year will be a lot better here.
It'll be okay, James.
We'll do
The best laid plans, or somebody said, like Murphy always comes to the party.
Gang after glay.
Yeah.
Okay, so how does disruptive technology like 3D printing and CNC milling routing influence society? I feel that it's very, very strongly influencing a lot of our design right now. For the past 20 years, our design has been dominated by mass production. We need to make as many of them as cheaply as possible. So make them in standard sizes. Your shoes are the exact same shoes that came off of a stamped machine, and boom, 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 boom. We're going to spit them out as quickly as possible. So anytime you start talking about digital fabrication, 3D printing, CNC milling, anything like that, it's going to dramatically alter that. So instead of going for, we want to make as many of them as we can possibly scale to as quickly as possible, it's going to change that paradigm and flip it over to, we want to make this specifically for you. And that's going to introduce things like allowing us to do intricate details on the interior of objects, allowing us to do very specific taste-oriented details on the exterior. If you happen to be a Hello Kitty fan and you want every step that you take to have a little Hello Kitty footprint in the sand, then that's perfectly something that we can set all of your shoes to do once we get to the point where your shoes come out of a 3D printed machine.
And just your size for just your foot.
Just your
That's what I want.
And don't need any orthopedic, additions, because it will perfectly fit your foot.
The locomotives car is a good example of that, where we, some of you that have maybe heard of locomotives, we're building a facility here off Pellissippi Parkway. This year, it'll be done by the end of the year, but we'll have large scale 3D printers there. Some of the vision that we have, as you can imagine, and we're talking about disruptive technology, the automotive industry, it takes years, if you were to create new tooling, to come up with a new model and a new design and get that out there. Where
what Local Motors is going to do is bring to market a 3D printed car. And so you can actually purchase a car, make selections, hit print and purchase, if you will, and it'll be printed on a machine right there at the factory. You can come in, you can view it. You want to make a change to it, maybe even possibly where you could bring in your own designs or sit down with a designer and make those changes, and then the car is printed out the way you would desire certain portions of it to be. That's something that the automotive makers, the way they are right now, the majority of them could not adapt as quickly in a matter of overnight to days to just weeks to get certain different design changes implemented into a car that can be made specifically to you. That's something that they couldn't do for the larger markets. And so part of this idea is having facilities all around the country, so much larger numbers of distributed manufacturing, if you will, or manufacturing right on location to where the customers are. So you wouldn't be buying a car made in another state. You'd be able to go right to your local major city, if you will, and get your car. So that's something that's very disruptive, and one way that 3D printing technology is going to affect in a real way in the coming future here. So it's really one disruptive example, and happy if anybody has any more questions about those cars and other products like that can be made on the 3D printer. I'd be happy to talk about that.
I mentioned the chairs.
The chairs.
I love the chairs that you guys did for the proof of concept. The 3D printed chairs.
Yeah, really good item to run the printer through tests, as well as a usable product, and as well as not waste material. But we can also recycle the material as well, which is being evolved. But one of the first usable items that was used or printed on this large scale printer was more or less a chair, sort of in an S shape. Just sort of went around it up. If you look at the side profile of it, it has no support on the back. It's completely supported by just think of it, if you could bend a piece of wood flat on the ground, curve up behind the back of your legs, underneath your rear thighs and up your back, just side profile, and it's completely suspended just by a spring action, if you will, on the material. So there's no rear supports to that chair. That's easily supports a 300-pound person, etc., or more, with no problem. Right on this printer, large scale printer. One of the things that enables that are some of the material advances that Sam was talking about, these different materials that are coming and flowing into the 3D printing area. So we have carbon fibers that are mixed into the plastic, and those fibers help reduce the amount that the material is going to shrink and warp and give it more strength. They use fiberglass. There's some of the different materials coming out for those sort of the smaller printers at first. There's wood fibers mixed in. There's a variety of different plastics, ABS, nylons, and all kinds of different materials. But the furniture is one avenue that's a real easy one. Certainly with a large scale printer like this, you can print and design a table. Actually, just drew up a table we're going to print in a few days. Something that, again, as you mentioned, if you want to make a change, you want a part of it that supports your laptop, you can draw that up, hit print, and your new table has that. I think the recycling is going to eventually become more and more an added benefit to it. It's less talked about now, but say you printed that chair, you don't necessarily have to sell it or get rid of it. Eventually, you could grind it up and reuse that material to go back through the printer. Certain materials are going to lose properties doing that, but they're still usable. So maybe you had some part that was really structural. Maybe you had a frame to a go-kart you made, and you ground that up, reuse the material. That material may not have the strength for the full frame again, but it may have the strength to do the seat, for example. So that's something that we'll be seeing more and more. I think as this technology grows, that'll become more and more of an issue and question.
In terms of the material, especially automotive applications, I'm curious, is there anything strong enough to do something like an automotive wheel?
For a wheel.
So he asked if there's anything strong enough for a wheel.
Yeah, any material is strong enough for a wheel. There technically are, but not in a realistic format right now. Like technically, for some applications, some of the metal printers could do a wheel that would certainly work functionally and have the strength. Of the plastic materials, it would be, let's say, like on a go-kart level right now, that's certainly doable. Some bicycles and things like that. For a full, let's say, 3,000-pound car, much more complicated. I could see it done with a mix of materials. You could 3D print like a metal hub and then have a plastic or form of fiber reinforced plastic that's sort of sandwiched together that could perform it, but not extremely realistic yet for that level of strength. But rubber's getting, the plastic on the rubber side, if you will, the tread, the tire. There's thoughts and things moving in that way. There's some materials like a material called Ninja Flex that some have heard about. There's a lot of the smaller 3D printers are commonly using. It's when you print it out, it's basically it feels in your hand like a rubber or a polyurethane. Has flexibility. We actually printed over the lab just a spoked wheel that's about 6 inches wide, and we just dropped it off the top of the building, and it bounces. It's got flexibility to it, but the compounds in the rubbers wouldn't hold for hundreds of miles, and et cetera. But things are moving towards all those different materials and avenues to be able to fulfill those demands and desires of product needs.
So you mentioned metal. That capabilities out there to 3D print in metal?
Yes, it is.
Very expensive.
Yeah, it's very expensive right now. There's a variety of different ways. I mean, in some ways, you can picture a bed of powder or a thin layer of powder and shoot like an electron beam at it to, in a sense, fuse it, melt it, that just the area where that beam hit, and then put more powder on top and, hit the next layer, and each layer builds upon the next. And there's a variety of different machines out there that do it different ways. There are even companies that are working towards trying to take like robotic arms and almost, in a sense, have like a welding nozzle and moving. Some things are progressing in those directions as well. But there are actual turbine blades and some things even into that degree that have been printed and used in some capacities. And there are different. There's porosity that you end up with a lot of the methods now, where you have microscopic, if you will, holes. Bubbles, if you will, in areas, and so some have more than others, and they'll literally maybe make the part has some good strength, and then they'll take it and basically infiltrate it with another liquid metal, if you will, or way to get metal to form on the inside and fill those cavities. They'll do a stainless steel part, and then they'll put bronze in to fill all the holes, and that'll give it a significant amount more strength. So there's lots of different directions it's going, but metal printing is definitely there. It's just at the high cost level right now because of the levels of equipment, like having an electron beam or something like that is much more difficult to do and affordable to get at this point. But that'll eventually reach to the consumer level. It's all headed in that direction. So on the recyclability side, I think is a real big area that, as I was mentioning, sort of stemming off to before, to be able to not waste so many things and reuse. I mean, there are people right now that have, on the smaller scale, have made their own little machines that crunch up plastic. Maybe they have a VCR or different products. They'll pick up a yard sale or somewhere, and they'll just run up through a grinder, and then those pellets they'll feed into a heated extruder that will just push out a little bead, if you will, or a stream of filament that you could use in your 3D printer. If you could to imagine that in your minds, when I say extruder, it's like think of a drill bit and you put that drill bit in a cylinder, and if you spin it, that spiral around the drill bit would, if it keeps spinning, would cause material to move down the tube, and they'll just heat that tube and push that plastic through it, and run it through a little nozzle to get the material out. And so at home, you'll see people at homes using recycled material already. And some smaller companies are selling miniature machines to basically do that at home yourself if you want. That was pretty interesting. It really is going to be more and more at our doorstep. I think in the much sooner than it seems like.
You mentioned chairs. Did you mention car seats as well?
I didn't mention that, but it is certainly something that we're experimenting with and working with right now in a variety of different ways. It's even some we're going to do a little experiment with some of that Ninja Flex material to create basically a rubber padded seat top that would go on top of the already 3D printed chair structure. We're mostly looking at it in our vehicles in this early stage as a part of the structure of the chassis, and then there would be components added on top of that rigid structure. So I say that meaning not like a separately printed chair that then gets bolted into the 3D printed car, but that structure of the underneath parts of the chair is actually formed right into the frame of the car.
Is there sort of like a modular design? Maybe?
He asked if there's a modular design.
Is there one that exists right now? You mean for cars with 3D printing? There isn't right now that I know of anybody that has a modular just 3D printed car design, et cetera, that is in process. Modularity is certainly one thing that's being with our certainly car designs. We'll reuse suspension components and different steering components and things and share those between vehicles. But in the seating realm, there isn't a modular design right now that exists.
I was wondering for the sake of ergonomics, not economics, ergonomics.
So you mean like, say the customer gets the car and they want that seat to fit them and be molded to them particularly? That's been definitely heavily talked about. It's not in the, let's say, the list of things that's going to be right off the bat in our first cars, but very much a thing that I'd expect. I couldn't say officially that locomotives will have that in a specific time frame, but I can say from being in the environment and working for the company that it's very likely will become the case. It's definitely an added benefit. And sell the car and can just go to the company, have a new seat printed, and pop that in. Great question.
Cool. This one next.
So, Professor Klett, one of Professor Klett's students, has asked, where do you see 3D printing advancing in the next 10 years?
Pause for Dr. What do you think?
So I think we're very early in the innovation curve still. So traditionally, when you're looking at anything that's based on heavily electronics, heavy computer modeling, it's going to follow, logarithmic curve as it gets better. And I say we're still down here in the hockey stick. It's kind of going up. So, but we're very getting close to the point where it's going to take off like a rocket. I think the next 10 years are going to see some very dramatic improvements. And I don't think it's going to be so much faster. I think we'll see, significant improvements in deposition speed and probably in layer thinness. But I think what we will really see is in how computers interact with the models. What I'm really intrigued in currently is all of the work that goes into making the models easier to work with, like apps on an iPad that allow you to actually interact with a model. I mean, there's one out there right now for MakerBot that I think just shows an amazing amount of progress. It has a set of basically kids' toys, and they're very moldable. And you put it on the iPad, you open it up, and you can squeeze the faces and expand them and everything. And then when your child is finished playing with them, you can print it out in whatever color they happen to like. When you think about that technology as very early stage, think about that in 10 years when we hit the far end of that acceleration curve, when it becomes as easy to do that kind of modeling at a high end for something like your very own personal chair, your very own personal table, your own shoes, your own clothes, just as a, I want a new shoe. Yeah, okay, let's go on my iPhone. Okay, there it is, boom. And it's all done. that's, I think, where I'm going to place my money for the big improvements in the next 10 years.
Yeah. I could show, here's an example of what you're talking about. Let's see if this will come up on the camera or not. Let's see. Is that good? Let's see if I can finally get this to. It's not going to work, is it?
Pretty bright.
Here, let's try. Let me try to pull up an object. This is called OnShape. Pull it further away.
Still thinking, I think.
Yeah, give it a sec here to load. There we go. See, can everybody see that? Okay, so there's an object. That's actually the desktop I was just talking about. So this is a program called OnShape that's just come out that the designers of SolidWorks created, or the original creators of SolidWorks. They've started this company is a cloud-based CAD software. It's free actually right now. You could go on and get it for free. You can pay money for a larger amount of cloud-based storage, but this is a CAD program that doesn't use your background computer, if you will. It works right off your web browser. So you can go on Safari or Google Chrome or something and just open it up, sign in, and here's your thing. And so here's that desk that I was mentioning that I was going to print the other day. I can actually edit this right on the screen. Here I'm going to just hit over here, this like hide that part, so I'd sort of hide away that portion of the table or desk. You can literally right on the, as mentioned on the surface. Let's see if we can create a. I haven't used this much on the phone, but you can literally suggest. Let's see. Pick items. If you can draw. Pick a sketch plane. Without my experience with this yet on the CAD, I do it on the computer, but.
The curse of the live demo.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm not going to bother to take the time to do that and learn here in front of you on the phone, but literally I could draw on the top of that table a shape, extrude it up, etc. Draw whatever, or import a file and put it right on that. And this program right here will export an STL file that your common 3D printers will use. So then right there, that's a free program. Has a significant amount of power and capability. That table was entirely drawn on that program, and you can send that right to your 3D printer. So you don't even need to. As Sam and some others mentioned earlier, a lot of the programs that we used to cost thousands and thousands of dollars to even obtain to get a 3D file. Those are all accessible now, and the file sharing that Glenn was talking about, where I draw this table, put it up on a site somewhere, and it's available to the world to access. There's a lot of things out there, and that in the next 10 years too is going to continue to grow these libraries of files that can be used and shared. You can imagine a washing machine repairman to not have to go and order and wait several days for a part. He can go to his van and print out a new bracket or clip to hold the washing machine barrel in place. And have his company will have probably files for those plastic pieces already there in a database. He can just pull up and print right there in the truck, fix the machine, and move on. Those are real things that are going to be happening.
In regards to that, can I ask a question? It almost seems too good to be true. It's so neat, that anybody's going to be able to do that. But do you see down the road somehow this getting more, I guess, commercialized? I mean, people are going to. I don't know how to explain what I'm trying to say, but I think you guys get it.
It's really been around since, I'm probably wrong, I can at least say the early 80s, but it's probably before that large of the bigger companies we know of, I don't know, aerospace companies, Boeing and so on, some of these companies have worked with 3D printing years ago. You talk to some of the engineers and scientists from them, they're like, yeah, we've been doing that since I was in my 20s and I worked for this company. So it's to them, it's not news. We are really now where that technology is more accessible. We're having, more and more kids coming out of school that CAD software and all the applications and so on in their phones, that they're learning many more of these things that to us when we were younger, when I was younger, was very few people knew, understood, and had access to and could do. It's the more and more they grow up, the more easily these things are figured out and used and accessed. So I think that it's certainly going to be more and more realistic. And one of the, like Lynn was mentioning, there's some of the cost of printers. There's a $179 printer called Tico that just came up on start Kickstarter, and there's many more versions, but that's a $179 3D printer that prints a pretty good quality product. And those are, you know, a lot of people are just going to have those sitting right next to their desks. I mean, that kind of price, it's hard not to for a lot of people.
So there is one aspect that is kind of interesting that I've been following closely. Makerbot, one of the larger commercial to the small scale printers, has actually gone and created what's basically an app store. And they actually have Sesame Street characters. And interestingly enough, Sesame Street, like all corporations that have those kinds of copyrights, want money if you print or display their likeness anywhere. So it's very interesting to see how that evolves. So they very straightforwardly said, okay, here you go. If you want to be able to print out Big Bird, it'll cost you 99 cents. Here's your model that lets you print Big Bird, whatever size you want. So I think we will see that. We'll see more of it. It will be based around intellectual property. There'll be things that will be, yes, you can't print out, Robert De Niro because Robert De Niro has, rights to his own likeness. But if you wanted to print out, just a generic object, there'll be plenty of those. Does that kind of speak to what you were looking for?
I love the idea that everyone wants to share it, and it's everyone gets to enjoy it. It's cool. But I mean, I can imagine, like you were talking about earlier, my washing machine the last 10 years has probably broke down 7 times, and I've fixed it every time. And I've gone online and ordered parts, and I can't imagine going downstairs and pulling up a file and printing a part for it, and then going up and fixing it myself, essentially for free. That's an awesome thought.
Yeah.
But what I see is, GE or Whirlpool or whoever it is
charging you 99 cents for that part.
Least, right?
Yeah.
So
but there's definitely going to be the companies that are going to keep proprietary information where they can keep that business for their repairmen. For example, they may choose to close up their brackets and clips and that data or not share it. But their repairman who is paying for a license, let's say, from them to access those files and has a 3D printer in his truck can then get that part and not have to wait. So he's just saved a much large amount of time to get the part to you and to repair your washing machine. You don't have to wait. He doesn't have to wait. And they still have a way to capture their designs and their intellectual property that they want. It's wonderful how many more and more places and people are sharing that kind of information. But there's no doubt going to be a level of maintained information like that to keep profits in those certain companies.
And not everything is open source and free. There's this whole big wide world of it that is, but there's a lot of it that isn't. And if you're interested, you can go to a website called Shapeways, and they have a lot of files that people have done on their own, mostly artists, that type of thing. And they're selling I think you can buy the design and print it yourself, but most of the time you would want to pay them to print it on a nicer printer, but you have to buy their intellectual property, their art, basically. So they're selling some really nice jewelry and some just beautiful artwork and decorative things like, lamps and.
I think it's encouraging that they tend to seem to be following the App Store. We'll take micro payments, 99 cents, $2, not here, I'm going to charge you $30 just to even let you see it. Yeah.
Say you worked on your car before, you have to go buy a Haynes manual or something to figure out the instructions how to do this. Now, like for most things, you can just type in, how to get rid of the code on my Honda Accord, and they tell you a procedure how to there's 5 different videos that different people have put up. And you had a problem with your washing machine. If you had that ability, you drew up a little bracket. Or you get those machines that have the same problem, all the same model. Somebody found a fix. You get somebody like that, post that thing up. They didn't necessarily draw their bracket or their clip the way that the OEM manufacturer did. They're not copying. They're just finding their own solution for this. That's going to be out there. So over time, there are certain degrees and areas of that are just naturally going to be open source, and not a way that is going to be controlled by the companies making some of the other larger having some of the larger industries, if you will.
If you get on websites like Thingiverse that are open to people uploading their own files and ones that they or their friend have created, there'll be a little icon down in the corner that says that it falls under the Creative Commons license, or Creative Commons license, I believe. And what that basically means is that they have uploaded it as an open source type thing. Other people can access it, other people can modify it. Now, at some point, somebody could make their own version of that. It could have modifications. It could be their own design that's based on that. And they could technically copyright it at that point, and that you would have to pay for. But as long as this individual part falls under the Creative Commons license, anyone is available to print it and use it as they please.
And with the Creative Commons license, there are a lot of attributes there. You've got commercial use is allowed. You've got non-commercial use only. The most common involves share alike. There's a share alike attribute. So if you use this part, if you modify it, you have to share it with the same Creative Commons license or more. You have to share it with the same Creative Commons license. So there's some protection there, and there's still some gray areas that's figured out. I've got something, a thought here about the phone app we were looking at. So if you think about years ago when web design was a special case, that was something that not a lot of people knew how to do. And now, I'm not going to do free marketing for any companies out there, but now you can go on there and sign up with a free account, click and drag, and create a website within seconds. So, maybe as this progresses, we'll see more of that. And to that end, something I'm wondering about is, especially since Sarah has made a lot of, she's made a lot of effort to make this fully accessible. How, as this develops, how are we going to see 3D modeling for those with special needs, those with vision impairments? How can we develop that to make that more accessible to them? Does anybody have any thoughts there? That's just a general thought.
I think it's probably things we can envision. Things. There aren't things that I know of well to say that these are definitely in the works and so on. But the capabilities are I think evident. The more you get into the 3D printing and the different additive manufacturing methods, the more usable the stuff gets. I mean, where AutoCAD originally, the CAD programs, you mean like typing in numbers, where to place things, and now on the phone you can just touch, and move things. So it can
Right.
All those things start to merge together. I think it'll be more and more accessible and be able to make more. I mean, a lot of the impairments that we all have, there are things that we can make to make life easier. I mean, one thing I often said as engineers is that what they do is make people's lives easier in a sense. And so you have whatever kind of element or issue or impairment you might have, that these the ability of this technology becoming more being able to produce products more customized to people, I think will open up more opportunities in that direction. Does that sort of answer what you're saying?
Yes.
Can you think of any good arguments against 3D printing, any sort of weaknesses about it, or anything like that? Something that's not easily provable is much better than different.
Yes. Are there other manufacturing methods that are existing that in applications that would be better to not use additive manufacturing and use a more traditional method or some other new method? Yeah, there definitely are. On the and it goes both ways. So that there is a thought where some people get involved in 3D printing and they just keep moving in that direction towards additive, when a subtractive method could have been much better, and faster or more accurate. But they just still think in the mindset of additive must be better. Trying to think of an example.
Any mass-produced item.
Yeah.
Anything at scale.
Yeah, anything at scale. It's a good example.
And unfortunately, it's beautiful. It's fantastic. It makes an item that is exactly what you want, but it's slow.
If you want, like we mentioned, a tabletop, if you have a machine that can just press out out of a piece of sheet metal an entire tabletop that's a large piece and do that in 10 seconds, where it might take, at least at present, a couple hours to print that piece, that's going to be a place where the additive manufacturing wouldn't necessarily make sense. I think as time progresses and the speeds of those machines increase, that will shift a little bit. But there's the large scale items that it's would be hard to keep up with. So that's a really good example. What's talked about on the opposite side with the additive is things like shapes where you're starting with a solid chunk and you can't get a structure inside or a machine bit in there to make those shapes, and you can 3D print intricate things inside of a closed cell, if you will, or a partially closed cell that you couldn't before. And at the facility down the street at the MDF, they have robotic arms that have hydraulic passages inside, and all the movements are run through hydraulics, and you can run fluid through chambers from each link of the arm out to the tips, and you couldn't machine those shapes and cavities by traditional methods. But you can, at the same time, you can't do it. You're limited by the speed of that machine's ability. There are good examples. I don't know why my mind's having trouble thinking of some of the real good examples of the processes that would be better than another, or additive versus subtractive. But skill is like jumps to my mind. I mean, like the more you say that, like you have a piece that needed those more complex spaces. If it was a plastic part, injection molding parts, you pre-make a tool and pump out parts through that injection molded part. Again, those are going to be things that additive wouldn't make as much sense for.
Also, anytime that your specific material is important to you, if you have to have the piece out of wood, we've got a few materials that are very wood-like. They are not wood. We have a few materials that are very ceramic-like. They are not ceramic. Anytime you want to integrate circuits into the actual piece itself, we're getting very close. There are a couple of pieces of machinery out there that do something that's very close to integrated circuitry as part of it. But right now, it's much easier to go ahead and stamp out a PCB board as a separate process and slot it in.
Some other questions or some other direction?
Yeah, actually, this kind of speaks a little bit to a discussion we were having earlier. This is one of Sam's questions. This was really interesting to me. This is something we'd want to hear from Dr. Boyer about, but Sam's asked, what's the next, what has to happen to further bring open source 3D printing to the emerging third world? And I'm not sure how we could answer that, but one thing that we were talking about earlier is recyclables and extruding recyclable materials. And I think that may play a large part in it. Does anybody have any insights on that?
Well, it was definitely one where I was hoping to get Dr. Boyer's insight into. It's a very interesting question to me. I love the concept of the whole open source movement being available and being so inexpensive. When you're talking about being able to give somebody a $1,000 kit that's basically an industrial revolution, that's a huge step up anytime you're able to talk about moving forward. If you could airdrop a 3D printer, a Raspberry Pi, and some solar cells into some isolated areas and say, go to it, see what you can make, it'd be a fascinating social experiment. I would love to get to the point where we could do something that could really make that just part of the emerging billions that are coming out of poverty now. It gives them that opportunity.
I saw it was some researcher's graduate program, and I don't know if you've seen this too, but he built a solar powered 3D printer. It was huge, but it took the energy of the sun, probably through a Fresnel lens that you can get out of old TVs now, and used it to melt the sand.
Oh, nice.
To make glass, to make crude structures out of glass, which I think would be, if you could build houses and build, furniture and build bowls and whatever you needed out of sand and sunlight, that would be, the art is fine, but it's not very life-changing for for the third world. But I just saw that and thought, where is that going to be in 10 years? Because I don't know if it's certainly one where you don't have to worry about your resources running out, because you can find sand just about anywhere.
The more minds are getting sparked, like the growth of the additive manufacturing of the small desktop 3D printers is really getting more and more people involved in it, and the more collaboration and sharing of these things online, it's the more and more there's options to benefit society, and as we see over time. And there's another one, they're trying to figure out a way to 3D print clothing and cloth. I mean, they've got some rudimentary systems on that. It's got a long way to go to become where you're printing your own clothing. But I wouldn't have necessarily thought of that. There's more and more of those things that are coming out. The more people are thinking about it and pursuing it and learning and sharing. So it's interesting. It's very interesting. They're amazing, the speed and the changes and things are happening.
For someone who has had zero experience at all, do you have any sort of suggestions for if someone wanted to have a little desktop 3D printer? Do you know where someone would begin with that, like Blender or AutoCAD or whatever programs are?
Do I take that, Sam?
Well, actually,
Last week, we had a class for young women to come in here to Pellissippi, and we're probably going to hold another class in late July. We put together printer bots that were about $350 kits and learned about one of the free software packages. I'm just going to go ahead and mention it, Google SketchUp. I'm not endorsing it, but it is free and it's pretty easy to use. So we introduced them to that. We built printers. It took us about 2 full days, spent a day troubleshooting and getting the printers online and getting them to print. And then Friday they printed all day and took their printers home. So you could do it yourself at home in a week, I promise. But maybe if we have the class again in July, you can sign up for it and we'll teach a little bit about 3D printing and getting started. That's really all you have to do is just kind of make the decision of what you want to own, and if you want to do a rep wrap and assemble it yourself, or if you want to buy one that's already plug and play, that you won't learn nearly as much about how to fix it when it breaks. So I highly suggest that you go ahead and go through the pain of that build process, because you'll learn an awful lot that way and be able to take it apart and make modifications and fix things when they break. But don't be intimidated by it. If the teenage tech savvy young ladies are doing it,
and just
you can do it.
Don't
too.
agree to do it in a single weekend.
No, that sounds a week was kind of painful, but fortunately, probably since the time you did that, a lot of the kits have really good instructions and really good videos and really good ideas about how to troubleshoot. So it gets easier and easier every day because of that open source idea. So.
So should we wrap up?
Yeah, I guess we're wrapping up here. I just want to real quick at least ask, would you like to ask your students questions or do?
I think we can probably just send them to them.
Yeah,
We'll
send
just
those
send
to
them.
Adrian, because
Okay.
they're all very specific to him.
Okay. All right. Does anyone else have any closing statements or anything?
It was great.
Buy local motors cars, come out, visit Knox Makers.
Come to room 131 and see our printers. And there's actually a chair in the Bagwell Auditorium where the art studio is set up. One of the local motors chairs is out there. So if you want to go sit down in one of those cool 3D printed chairs, go to Bagwell.
Yeah, thanks to our panel here. I really appreciate everybody. I'm sorry we ran into technical problems. Thank you all. And we're sorry we weren't able to connect with Dr. Boyer, but we look forward to hearing from him later.
Maybe we can actually set up something where we'll do an actual video interview with him and then give that back to Pellissippi.
We'll see what he can do. We really do appreciate it. Thank you all. Please enjoy Makerpalooza today, and thanks to Seth Giles and Sarah Graham for putting all this together. This has been amazing.